Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 832 podcast. And today we're going to start kicking off our series on the parables, stories Jesus would tell to teach us something.
Indeed.
And today we're going to kick it off with the first parable that comes up, and that's the parable of the sower.
Yeah, this is one of the meatier ones. I don't know if it's one of the longer ones. But it's definitely got a lot going on.
Yeah. And so where you can find this is Matthew chapter 13, and we're going to start Matthew chapter 13, verse 1 to 9. On that day Jesus went out of the house and was sitting by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, while the whole crowd stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, Consider the sower who went out to sow. As he was sowing, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Others fell on rocky ground where there wasn't much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since the soil wasn't deep. But when the sun came up, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered. Others fell among thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them. Still others fell on good ground and produced a crop, some 100, some 60, and some 30 times what was sown. Anyone who has ears should listen. That is Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 through 9.
So the parable of the sower kind of teaches, what you should expect when you're when you're sharing the word of God. And obviously the different kinds of sowers, soils are different kinds of hearers. So when we're talking about all that,
when we're talking about like when some seeds fell along the path and the birds came and ate them up. It's like these are the people that aren't even willing to receive the word. It just kind of bounces off the path, and then it doesn't take root ever because it gets taken away by the birds.
And if we look at Jesus explains this later, so I guess we should probably rely on his explanation before we start speculating.
All right.
But the soil in the road is hard packed, so you might be that their hearts are hard and they're just not receptive. So then the rocky soil. I always get worried about people who are super excited to hear about something first, because when they're super excited to hear about it, they remind me of these people, and then have reliability issues later.
Right.
So I would rather somebody have a better understanding of it. So she fell among thorns. Now, I grew up hearing that this was like bad influences, but that's not at all how Jesus describes it later. It's one of the most common interpretations of this verse, but that's not what Jesus explains it as. So it's obviously not like it could kind of be folded into that, but it's just letting worldly things interfere with your faith. It's like I would love to commit, but my family would disown me. I'd love to commit. My wife would leave me. I'd love to commit, but I could lose my job, stuff like that.
Right.
And the last
or I'd like to commit, but like me putting my resources towards the church would mean I wouldn't be able to get more resources, because later on it does say the seduction of wealth.
Right.
So I could gain more if I don't follow the word, if I don't commit to the word.
Right. And there's more things that I can do if I don't have to worry about that whole conscience thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's the thing. And then good soil yielded grain. So, obviously, good soil is the rarest,
Mm-hmm.
but it has the highest return on investment.
Right. Because the rest has zero return on investment.
Exactly.
So the good soil is infinitely better.
Well, I mean, yeah. But, okay, so the good soil is one of four. But you get 60 times, or 100 times or 30 times back what you put out. So it's worth it.
Right.
To have to deal with all the other kinds of soil for what that 1 in 4 will yield for you, because it's far more than you risked on the others.
Right. That's actually a really interesting point. It's like, even if one person, like of the, like, I guess a proper example, like of the 40 people you told, if 10 are good soil, it was worth it.
Right.
Of the 4 people you told, if only one accepts it, then it was worth it.
Right, because by the lowest numbers, if 10 were good soil, you'll yield a crop of 300.
Right.
And you only talk to 40.
Right.
So that's one of those things you can't underestimate what God will do. And all you do is put the seed out.
Mm-hmm.
God does the rest.
Right.
You just have to hope it hits the good soil. So the soil can definitely relate to hearers of the word who have not, don't have a relationship with Christ. Part of me thinks that we can also be these kinds of soil in our own lives sometimes. Like, sometimes you're just so bitter about things that, God could be talking directly to you. The word could fall directly on your head and you wouldn't even notice.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you could get really super excited about a church or a program or something like that. And then, the instant you hit a roadblock, you just quit. So I think even believers can be each kind of soil. I know I've been each kind of soil at some point in my life.
Right.
So, and there are things that you can do to help prepare soil. If you know that the kind of soil you need to be, how to prepare the soil, then you need to prepare the soil. And then, that way the seed has a better chance of hitting the right spots. And that's, I think so. Verses, 10 through
No, it's verses 18
right.
through
You're right.
23 is the parable of the sower explained. Since we've talked about basically our understanding of it so far, let's read what Jesus had to say to explain it.
Right.
This is Matthew chapter 13, verses 18 through 23.
I'll read it. Listen to the meaning of. Hold on, let me switch my. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. And this is what was sown along the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another case 60, and in another case 30. So this was something interesting that I noticed is plants need sunlight to grow. We're aware of this. To produce anything, plants need sunlight.
Photosynthesis.
Indeed. But if they don't have deep enough roots so they can get to the water that they need, then the sunlight kills them, burns them up. And so I thought it was funny where that the same process that burns up the seed without roots is the same process, is the same source that's going to give them life. And that is tribulation and persecution. So, when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, so that will grow you or kill you, depending
in your faith.
Depending on how much
right,
how deep the roots of the soil is.
Right, whether you've dug in or not.
Right.
And that's clearly applicable because we've talked about my middle school experience extensively on the podcast. But through those trials and tribulations, I grew in my faith because of that.
Right.
And I would not be where I am now if it weren't for those things. Anyways, we gotta let
the dog out. Come on, Reese.
Because he be whining. And his whining be obnoxious.
You too, Bear. Come on.
Bear gets to go too. It's the plight of this podcast, the animals, sometimes, because, and like with Reese, there's not much you can do, because even when he's outside whining, like, we can hear it.
Right.
And most of the time, that means that we're also going to pick it up on the mic.
Right.
But the best we can do is to put him outside.
Indeed.
But yeah, so we were talking about the one sown on rocky ground, who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, but has no root, and so his faith is short-lived. That's also similar, like you were talking about, the people who are, like really happy when they hear the news, like at summer camps and stuff.
Sure.
Everyone gets like, woo! But that's really short-lived if you're not like maintained after that, or if you don't grow after that and dig deeper than the initial yay.
So I've come to believe that it is important to worship God in all things, in all ways, but not to do it recklessly. Not to, just because you're whipping up the crowd and everybody seems to be having a good time doesn't mean you're actually worshiping God.
Right.
You could be worshiping the high of the crowd.
Right. If your focus is on making the crowd happy and joyful, like if your focus is on the crowd, your focus is on the wrong thing.
Right.
But there's a difference between reading the room and focusing on the crowd.
No. Reading the room is kind of see where you can go, but focusing on the crowd is like, let me hear you say, "Yay, Jesus!"
Can I get an amen?
Right.
Amen. I need it louder.
Exactly.
God, that's always frustrated me. So what ends up happening is I scream at the top of my lungs.
Right.
And then they tend not to ask again.
I used to do that when I was in the Army. in the reserves, whenever they called us to attention, we were supposed to say warrior medics robustly, and I screamed at the top of my lungs in the most ridiculous and annoying way I could think of, without being completely disrespectful.
Right.
So yeah, I feel you there. Your focus, like in any period of worship, needs to be unity with the body, not whipping them into a frenzy,
Right.
and worshiping God.